version says Agamemnon killed a sacred stag in one of her groves. Another claims he boasted that he was a better hunter than the goddess herself. A laughable thing to say about a deity who could shoot a flea off a galloping deer. Regardless, Artemis demanded recompense. A life for a life, specifically the life of Iphigenia. The command was clear. Sacrifice your daughter, and the winds will return. Refuse, and the fleet rots at harbour. Your allies turn on you, and the war ends before it even begins. Agamemnon hesitated. He was after all a father, but he was also a king, a general, and a man of ambition. Eventually ambition won. He sent word to Clytemnestra, telling her to bring Iphigenia to Aulis under the false pretense that she was to marry Achilles. One can only imagine the mood when mother and daughter arrived. The joy of a royal engagement, the dressing in white, the proud father waiting, not with a ring, but a knife. What happened next depends on the storyteller. In some versions, Iphigenia is sacrificed on the altar, her cries silenced by the wind that finally returns. In others, Artemis has a last-minute change of heart, swaps the girl for a deer, and whisks Iphigenia away to serve in her temple at Tauris. But regardless of whether she died or was spirited away, one thing is certain. Clytemnestra believed her daughter was murdered, and Clytemnestra never forgot. Agamemnon went on to Troy, a city with high walls, high drama, and an unfortunate tendency to attract divine attention. There he clashed swords, shouted orders, and argued constantly with Achilles, whose ego could probably have sacked the city on its own. Years passed, 10 of them in fact. During that time, Agamemnon took a concubine, Cassandra, a Trojan princess cursed by Apollo. She had the gift of prophecy, but was doomed never to be believed, which made her something of a tragic Cassandra, in the original and most literal sense. Eventually, Troy fell. Agamemnon returned home in triumph. He brought spoils, stories, and Cassandra. What he did not bring was humility, remorse, or even a basic grasp of tact. Let us now turn to the Palace of Mycenae. Imagine it looming on the hill, built of great stones so massive that later generations would claim they were placed by giants, Cyclopean masonry they called it. Inside, the hearth glows faintly. Servants whisper, and in the hall stands Clytemnestra, waiting. For a decade, she has ruled in his absence. She has run the palace, raised the children, and endured the whispers about Iphigenia. And, most notably, she has taken a lover, Aegisthus, cousin to Agamemnon, and that same child born of incest between Thyestes and his daughter Pelopia. In many ways, Aegisthus was the curse personified, a walking, brooding embodiment of all the unresolved blood debts in the family. When Agamemnon arrived, he expected garlands and praise. What he received was a bath. Clytemnestra welcomed him graciously, helped him into the palace, and encouraged him to walk upon rich tapestries, an honour typically reserved for gods. Agamemnon hesitated, sensing hubris in the gesture, but relented. It was his last proud decision. Inside the bath, as he relaxed from his long journey, Clytemnestra threw a net over him, some say a robe or a fishing net, and struck him with an axe repeatedly. Some versions have Aegisthus deliver the blow, but most agree it was Clytemnestra who killed him. Not in a fit of passion, but in cold, ceremonial vengeance. Cassandra, ever the prophet, knew it was coming. She had seen her own death and Agamemnon's before they stepped off the ship. No one listened, of course. They never did. She was dragged inside and murdered as well. And so Agamemnon, hero of Troy, fell not on the battlefield but in his own home, in his own bath, at the hands of his wife. Was it justice? Revenge? Curse? All of the above, really. The Greeks, who had a knack for tragic reasoning, understood that blood begets blood, and every wrong, even one sanctioned by the gods, carries a price. Clytemnestra took power, ruling alongside Aegisthus. For a time there was uneasy stability, but Orestes, son of Agamemnon and Clytemnestra, did not forget. He was exiled, growing up in another court, told again and again of his father's murder. His sister, Electra, remained in Mycenae, nursing her own slow-burning fury. Years passed. Then Orestes returned. What followed was not swift. Greek revenge never is. Orestes plotted with Electra. He crept into the palace disguised, perhaps as a messenger or a stranger bearing news of his own death. The plan was theatrical, almost ritualistic. When the time came, Orestes killed Aegisthus. Then, face to face with his mother, he hesitated, but not for long. He struck her down, his mother. Her blood joined that of her husband, her lover, her daughter. The floor of the palace must have known its way around a stain by then. Yet this act, unlike Agamemnon's sacrifice, was not accepted in silence. The Furies came. Ancient, primal goddesses of vengeance, they pursued Orestes without rest. In every temple, in every dream, they howled. Not even Apollo could shield him for long. He sent Orestes to Athens to plead his case before the Areopagus, a jury of Athenian citizens presided over by none other than Athena. And for the first time in Greek mythology, justice became a matter not of blood, but of law. The trial was close. Half voted for acquittal, half for guilt. Athena cast the deciding vote, acquittal. She reasoned that the bond between mother and child, while sacred, was not greater than the father's claim, especially in matters of kingship and legacy. A legal decision, if not a warm one. The Furies, initially enraged, were given a new role, transformed from vengeful spirits into the Eumenides, the kindly ones. They would no longer torment, they would protect. A tidy ending, if you believe in such things. But the house still stood. The curse, perhaps lifted, perhaps merely dormant, lingered in the stones. And what of Agamemnon's folly? To the Greeks, he was both hero and cautionary tale. A great king brought low by arrogance, by sacrifice, by the inability to see past his own ambition. He led 1,000 ships, toppled a city, and returned to nothing. His story was told again and again, in Homer, in Aeschylus, in whispers beneath flickering torchlight. Not because he was noble, but because he was inevitable. The sort of man who always appears where curses linger. The kind of king who mistakes blood for legacy. So now, as you close your eyes, picture the palace once more, the bath water cooling, the axe leaning quietly against the wall, a woman stepping into shadow, a boy watching from the stair, and somewhere beyond, the gods exhale, tired of mortals and their endless inability to leave well enough alone. Picture, if you will, the quiet after a storm. Not the peaceful kind, but the thick, disquieting stillness that follows after something terrible has happened. The palace of Mycenae stands heavy with silence. The king lies dead. The queen too. The gods say nothing. The servants say even less. Orestes, son of Agamemnon and Clytemnestra, has done what no son should do. He has killed his mother. Now, one might argue, indeed, the entire city whispers it, that she had it coming. Clytemnestra murdered her husband after all, not with subtlety, but with a bath, a net, and an axe. For years she ruled with her lover Aegisthus, whose own birth was the product of incest, and whose presence at court never failed to irritate anyone still loyal to Agamemnon's memory. But in Greek thought, morality wasn't a neat ledger of he started it and she deserved it. It was far messier, soaked with blood and layered with expectation. Clytemnestra, for all her crimes, was still a mother. And the Greeks, much like the gods they worshipped, frowned severely upon matricide. When Orestes committed the act, when he lifted the blade, when his mother looked him in the eyes and called him her son, he set into motion one of the most haunting consequences in all of Greek mythology. He became prey to the Furies. They did not arrive with thunder or fanfare. The Furies are not showy, like Zeus with his lightning or Poseidon with his waves. They are quiet, persistent, unrelenting. Often called the Erinyes, they are older than the Olympians. Born from the blood of Uranus when Cronus castrated him, yes, that again, they serve a singular purpose, to punish those who violate the deepest taboos. And few taboos are deeper than the murder of one's own blood. They find Orestes quickly. No matter where he runs, they follow. Not walking, but swarming. Clad in dark robes, their hair a nest of writhing serpents, their hands dripping with unseen gore. They are not monsters exactly, but they are terrifying in their inevitability. Like guilt personified, like justice when it forgets to be kind. Orestes flees Mycenae. His sister Electra, who helped plan the revenge, stays behind. She had her own reasons, her own ghosts to placate. But Orestes is now alone, and madness settles over him like a second skin. He cannot sleep. He cannot eat. He hears whispering where there is none. His eyes twitch toward shadows. The Furies do not strike him down. They do something worse. They pursue him into exhaustion, into sickness, into the fraying edges of his mind. And yet they never touch him. That is not their way. At last, in desperation, Orestes seeks refuge at the temple of Apollo at Delphi. He collapses before the god's image, still reeking of blood and remorse. He begs Apollo for help, for protection, for forgiveness. Apollo, to his credit, takes responsibility. After all, it was he who told Orestes to avenge his father. Some say it was through an oracle. Others say Apollo himself whispered it into the boy's ear. Either way, the god cannot very well abandon him now. Apollo tells Orestes to go to Athens. There, he will be judged. Not by gods, not by curses, but by mortals. A trial will be held. And for the first time in Greek myth, justice will be a question of law, not vengeance. Now this is rather important, because up to this point in the long, bleeding tale of the House of Atreus, there's been very little room for balance. Justice was personal. If someone murdered your father, you murdered them. If your brother stole your throne, you cooked his children. And if you were wronged by the gods, you'd better hope you had a daughter left to sacrifice. But Athens, glorious, infuriating, democratic Athens, was different, at least in principle. They believed in courts, juries, deliberation. Not perfect, certainly, but better than nets and axes in the bath. So, Orestes travels to Athens, a fugitive dragging